Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to The Plant Path. I'm your host, Sage Popham, and I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy life to join me here for another discussion on herbal medicine. And in today's discussion, I want to talk a little bit about astrological medicine or medical astrology. And, this is a topic I like to discuss quite a bit because it is a central part of my personal approach to herbal medicine. The tool of the astrological chart is one that I use to work with people and help guide and understand what might be going on in regards to the health of their body, their psychology, their emotions, even them spiritually, and to help orient and understand what direction therapeutics might need to take in order for them to get well. And, that's really the ultimate point of any tool or system or approach that we use, right? Whether that be analyzing their blood work or doing a really in-depth intake and interview, figuring out what their dosha constitution is, or whether they're sanguine or phlegmatic or melancholic, or looking at their tongue or their pulse or their facial lines, whatever it is. I think we have, it's clear that we have lots of tools and systems and approaches available to us as modern day herbalists. And I think the most important thing is that we, first of all, find the tools that we resonate with the most, and hopefully find ones that give us accurate information and that we know how to use and work with. That no matter what it is, though, the ultimate goal is that we have a system, a model, an approach that enables us to figure out what's going on with the person, and that helps guide our remedy selection, and that when we administer those remedies, those lifestyle suggestions, dietary suggestions, that they get resolution, right? That they get well. And, I always say there's lots of pathways to the top of the mountain, and it doesn't really matter which pathway we take so long as we get to the top, that being the healing of the person that we're working with. And, it's funny because I feel like a lot of people out there really get so adamantly anti-astrology when they find out that it's a tool that I work with. I would say a majority of people seem pretty open to it. And like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that could be done. And then sometimes there's this vehement backlash of like, astrology is not real. And one of the big things is that and this is what I hear a lot, is that there's no scientific proof that astrology is real, that astrology actually works, that there's any way that a planet way out there in the solar system could affect us down here on Earth, that there is no proof, that there is no scientific validation that astrology is real, and that that its even existence is even valid. So I want to talk about that today because people bring it up to me more often than I prefer, honestly. But I think it's important to talk about because my response to this is, well, first of all, what do you mean by proof? Like, what does proof mean? I think that's an important thing to consider. And I think an even bigger part of that, on almost like maybe more of a philosophical level, like what exactly do you mean by truth? Like that astrology is not true, it's not real. Well, what is real? What is reality? What is truth? What constitutes truth? And what constitutes proof? I think these are important questions to ask because it gets into, I think important questions in terms of how do we get clear on the words that we're saying? How do we understand and perceive really what reality is? What is truth? What is not truth? What is the role of science? What is the function of science? What is it supposed to be doing? And I think when it comes to the topic of truth, I think there's an important distinction that I'd like to make in regards to this discussion of astrological medicine. And the first is this differentiation between scientific proof versus pragmatic truth. Okay, and that's what I want to talk about today. And I think this is kind of where I stand on it. I know different people have different minds and different approaches and different ways of thinking about things, and that's great and that's fine. But I think differentiating a scientific truth from a pragmatic truth is an important distinction here, because while there may not be necessarily scientific proof that astrology works or that there's any validity to it, there is whole stacks of pragmatic truths and proof from thousands and thousands and thousands of people across spans of hundreds of years and thousands of years across the world. So scientific truth. What constitutes scientific truth? Well, that's really difficult to define in a lot of ways, and it's going to depend on who you talk to. But I would say, generally speaking, it is one where there is, what is science, right? What is the science? Science is a method, okay? It is a methodology. It is approach to trying to determine something about the reality in which we live. And it typically begins as a question, right? A question, a hypothesis that then is thoroughly researched and tested and analyzed from multiple angles and multiple perspectives and by different people, and generally shown to be accurate. Like there comes to a point where there is a consensus where something has been looked at through multiple perspectives to be deemed either true or not true. And I think there's some problems with this. First of all, I think one of the biggest problems is that a lot of people get into the realm of science that really aren't scientists, or they don't actually have a very scientific mind. They don't apply the scientific method accordingly to the way it was designed to be applied. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of people that get into the scientific area of whatever it is, specific form of science that they're into, but people doing like more research science, is that they can go into it with a predisposition, I suppose, to what it is they want to figure out or what it is that they want to find. Like there's a lot of politics in science, and people, want to get published, or they want to get this, they want their thesis to be accepted, or they want to, whatever it is. There's oftentimes an underlying motivation that can be present in scientific research that skews it a little bit. I also think the biggest problem is that it's always changing. Things that were deemed to be true or not true 100 years ago may now have been proven to be wrong or correct. Things that are deemed to be true or untrue today will likely be proven otherwise in the future as science discovers more. It's like kind of an innocent until proven guilty kind of mindset, right? It's like sometimes it's seen as true until proven false. And I think it really, for some reason with astrology, it's false until proven true. I think both approaches can be taken by people in different situations. But I think the fact of the matter is that our understanding and knowledge of things is constantly growing. And just the fact that science at this juncture of time has not found a rational explanation for how planetary bodies in our solar system could influence and affect human beings on Earth doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or doesn't actually occur. It just means that they haven't figured out how to figure that out yet, right? I think there's a lot of other factors that come into play here in terms of sensitivity of our capacity to measure things, the instrumentation that is used, and also, as I said, the intention and motive of the scientist. A lot of people are looking for specific results, and if they are looking for a specific result and don't get it, they don't see the other results that they did get, and go, well, that's very interesting, and let's look into that a little bit more, which really would be kind of more of the scientific mindset. Funding has a lot to do with it too. I think one of the things about the nature of a scientific truth is that its very nature is very reductionistic. Its very nature is isolatory. It looks at these two things and wants to kind of blur everything else out and how it might influence it. And that's not really how reality always works. It can be a little bit too myopic. So I think that leads me to a bigger question, which is, can astrology even be proven by science? Is there any way science could ever possibly even deem it as being true or false, for that matter? I think these are important things to consider when it comes to people that need everything to be proven by science. That is, I think, a very limited, narrow worldview, because the scientific method has not really been around for that long. And if you need something to be proven by science, like, we need to be able to also trust our senses and trust our ability to perceive and our own capacity to decipher truth and reality for ourselves too, and not need this esoteric body of scientific knowledge to be able to tell us, which most people don't understand anyways, right? Like, most lay people could not go onto PubMed and read scientific research and have any remote clue as to what is being talked about. And so this makes for kind of a messy situation, in my opinion, when it comes to science and its relationship to astrology. Now, of course, there are people out there that claim there are scientific validations of astrology, and most of those are really viewed as being kind of more pseudoscience, like not well done science. And I would agree, there is some of that out there. I do think that there is not great research on this topic. Now, that doesn't mean it's not true, right? That does not mean it is not valid. That does not mean that there is not proof. Well, if you're still here with me, I have a sense that to you probably don't need a whole bunch of scientific proof and evidence that astrology is in fact real and effective and worth going deeper into understanding and learning about to make you a more effective herbalist. So I want to make sure that you know that right now, as this is coming out, our free Astro Herbalism mini course is happening right now. So be sure to head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, sign up for the free workshop series. We're in the middle of it right now, so it's not too late for you to get all 3 of these in-depth workshops going into some of the dynamics and nuances between synergizing astrological medicine and clinical herbalism. And for those of you that want to really take it to the next level, I want you to make sure that you know that in 1 week, we will be opening enrollment for our full Astro Herbalism online course. This is hands down the most in-depth, comprehensive exploration of the fundamental principles and practices, the skills and strategies for integrating the tool of medical astrology with clinical herbal medicine. So be sure to check it out. Head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com for the details. I hope to see you in the free workshop series, and I hope you will consider joining me in the full Astro Herbalism program. Once again, enrollment opens for that on April 3rd, 2025. This is our annual enrollment period where you get all kinds of extra bonuses. You get into the course at a discounted rate. This is your chance to get into that program now. So head on over evolutionaryherbalism.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there. And with that, let's get back to our exploration of scientific versus pragmatic truth. And that is what brings us to the other side of this equation, which is pragmatic truth. It's simply determined by the utility of something, right? And whether it is accurate, whether it is useful, whether it works or not. And my question that I always like to say with this one is, like, would astrology have stuck around for as long as it had in multiple traditions around the world for thousands of years, if it didn't work? Like, would it still be here? Would the greatest scholars and physicians and mathematicians and philosophers of the ancient world have used it if it didn't work? And I think especially since we're speaking about astrological medicine, physicians, like that's a really important area. Like I use astrology as a tool for working with people and understanding plants as an herbalist. So my take on it is very medically oriented. And that's a perspective and approach that's been used by astrologers for a very, very long time. And I think physicians tend to be pretty practical people, right? They're pretty pragmatic. It's like if they are doing something and it doesn't work, they're not going to do it anymore. Like that whole approach will get completely overthrown because it simply doesn't work. Obviously, when we study the history of medicine, there's some pretty dark times to be sure, right? There's some periods of time where the practice of medicine was pretty barbaric. Like for example, George Washington, right, was killed from being bloodletting, from having too much blood let out of his body. I believe for a case of bronchitis, I think is what it was, right? Obviously, mercurial medicines were being used for a long time. Poorly prepared mercury medicines were being excessively used. And people were poisoned. So I'm not saying the history of medicine is perfect, but obviously those things didn't work. And that became clear at a certain point in time. And we don't do that anymore, right? But if we look at the practice of medical astrology, people have been doing it for a very, very long time, both in Western traditions as well as in Eastern traditions. And it's important to know that it wouldn't have still be used if it did not work. And that is the pragmatic truth of astrological medicine, is that it does work. Again, it is used as a tool to understand what's going on with someone, what is making them ill, what is the diseased organ or system or tissue of the body, how is that diseased organ, system, or tissue specifically afflicted, what's going on within that system, and then what is the corrective path? What is the remedial pathway? What do we need to do about it, basically, to treat it? And then go about that therapeutic pathway and treat it, and then it works, right? If it works, then that means astrological medicine is pragmatically true. Whether we can explain how that works scientifically, to me, doesn't matter. Now, some people need that, and that's fine. But if you need that, then what I would say is you can't say that something doesn't work when it does work just because you don't understand how it works, right? That's, I think, an important distinction, is that just because we don't know how something works doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't, obviously. So I was like, it's like the old saying, the proof is in the pudding. And I don't really understand why we say the proof is in the pudding, but in this case, it's true. And the same is true with herbal medicine. I think this is something that comes up from time to time in discussions of herbal medicine, where people deny the validity of herbal medicine on the basis of it not being scientifically validated or proven that herbal medicine works. And that always really blows my mind, because it's like, really? Well, what do you think people did to heal themselves before we invented drugs, which was not that long ago, just in the last few hundred years? Plants have been used cross-culturally worldwide for thousands of years, effectively. Whether science can explain to us how that herb works or not doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that the herb works, it heals, it does the thing that people have said that it does for a very long time. And And it works. Now, so for me, I don't need science to tell me how an herb works, though I would say that it is very interesting when science can say, hey, check out this molecule in turmeric called curcumin, this complex of flavonoids called curcumin. Here's all the stuff that we've learned about it. Fascinating, amazing, love it. Do I need it? No, I don't. Is it interesting? For sure. Does it lead to potentially novel uses of herbs? Absolutely. And I think that's where science has a really interesting role in herbal medicine, is that through the discoveries of science, we might find new and novel and interesting ways to apply certain remedies based on what science learns about that herb that might be a little bit different. But I don't think we should or need to rely on science to explain or need to prove how and why herbal medicine works. You don't feel well, you take an herb, you feel better. What more proof do you need than that? So that is really my take on astrology, medical astrology or astrological medicine. As well, is that I've been using it for over a decade in my herbal practice. Through the chart, I'm able to speak to a person and get a sense for what's going on with them. I can look at their chart. I can further clarify and understand what's going on with them, see their pathological pattern reflected in their chart, see some other nuances and maybe some other contributing factors that might be causing that problem that they have. That helps to inform me about a good direction to take in terms of a therapeutic approach for them. And if that therapeutic approach works, then the method is sound. And I would also say it's very interesting, actually. I remember sitting in on some workshops with two of my teachers, Matthew Wood from the herbal medicine side, and then Judith Hill on the astrological medicine side. And it was really cool because they would do some intake stuff. And how did they do it? It was an in-person workshop. And I believe what it was that Matthew would be with a person. They would kind of explain what was going on, just real quick, kind of intake thing. And then he would do assessment on them based on the pulse and the tongue and the face and just kind of more physical assessment stuff. And then he would come up with his theory of what's going on. And then over here, Judith would just be looking at the chart. She would be there to get kind of the basic information. And then while Matthew was doing the more physical assessment piece, she would be looking at the chart. And they would come together and talk about it. And they would come to essentially the same conclusions. Now, again, same top of the mountain, just different pathways to get there. And so while I certainly know that using the astrological tool is not for everyone, certainly adds a steep learning curve for sure to learning and practicing herbal medicine, to incorporate that into it. But boy, for those that are called to it, it is a very potent and powerful tool. But I would say it is just that. It is a tool. It is not necessarily the only way. It's not the end all be all. It is essentially a useful method to work with the person. It's a useful system to classify and understand what our plants are doing. I like it because it also gives insight into the more invisible esoteric aspects of what might be going on for a person, and what the more esoteric attribute of the therapeutic properties of an herb are. Like, what's the connection between the therapeutic property of an herb and an esoteric property of an herb, which is kind of revealed through preparing herbs accordingly to the alchemical process, which is, really was my kind of gateway into the astrological aspect of medicine was through alchemy. So one thing about this too that I think is a point worth bringing up is this is one reason why I actually don't tend to inform my clients that I use medical astrology in my practice. this is a big misunderstanding a lot of people have with my work. A lot of people think like, oh, Seja does like this health astrology reading. And that's actually not what I do. I don't do that. Most people don't even know that I'm using a chart. It's more on the back end. So I do a normal intake, just like any other herbalist. Just do the whole intake process. And then during the case review, I'm usually referencing the chart in order to further clarify and refine the understanding of what's going on. So I always like to explain that to people because oftentimes there's a big misunderstanding in terms of how it is being used. I don't do readings for them in the consultation itself. It's just another tool in the toolbox, much like looking at the tongue, reading the pulse, doing physical assessment, usually just getting all the information I need on the front end through paperwork, right? Date, place, time of birth. That's all you need to get the chart, and just working with it on the back end there. And I mention that because, you don't want to be using the astrological tool because there is such sensitivity to the word astrology. There's such strong feelings that some people are like pretty neutral. They're like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I don't know anything about that, but right on. Or they're just neutral to it. But some people are very against it. And you really don't want to limit the people that you can serve based on that, right? Like you wouldn't want someone to be turned away from your work simply because you're going to use their chart as a tool on the back end to help clarify what's going on with them. So I always like to mention that it's like not something I advertise. Like no acupuncturist is going to advertise, I do pulse and tongue evaluation. Like most people don't do that. It's just inherent to the system. So I think the same is here. Like people don't necessarily need to know the methods that you're using. They just want a good result. And whatever method you use, as long as it gets you a good result, great. That is what you should go for. So a little rant today, this week here on the Plant Path, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about. And I think it can be very helpful for those of you that might also experience this maybe as you're out there in the world and you're representing what you do. And if you do use medical astrology, perhaps it comes up for you where people are like, well, that's a bunch of BS. I think it can be a useful talking point that people can use to differentiate scientific truth versus pragmatic truth, or scientific proof versus pragmatic proof. And that I will take pragmatic truth and proof all day long, no matter what we're talking about, over scientific truth and proof, because who knows, 10 years from then, that science that either disproved or approved of it might be totally wrong. And that just seems to be the changeable nature of science. And so I think I'll take the practicality of what works any day of the week. So thanks so much for making it to the end of this video. I do truly appreciate it. If you're watching or listening out there on the channels, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, share it with someone else that might enjoy this content. It really does help support the channel, as does watching all the way to the end. I truly appreciate that. Be sure to head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, where you can find more free videos on the Plant Path, more in-depth workshop series as well. And be sure to check out our spagyric product line over at Natura Sophia Spagyrics.com, where we have a broad spectrum variety of single herbs and formulas prepared accordingly to the spagyric method of traditional Western alchemy. It's Natura Sophia Spagyrics.com, and really appreciate you making it to the end. Thanks so much. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until the next time, take care and be well.